All right, Brian. So we've talked about some things that are fairly exclusive, right? Mega backdoors, HSAs. Let's talk about some strategies that maybe anyone or almost anyone can also implement. And certainly wealthy one percenters, high net worth individuals, high income individuals do this. And this falls in the category of small marginal optimization tweaks that can have big impacts. And what we're talking about is capital gains planning, whether that be through loss harvesting, gain acceleration, or capital gain avoidance.
Yeah, this is something we use for every one of our clients, and I even use this personally. This is one of those what we call financial mutant silver lining moments. Is when the market goes through its 2 out of every 10 years, decade, where it's going through bear markets. Mm-hmm. Market volatility, and your investments are going down, we turn those lemons into lemonade by actually using these strategies.
Yeah, so let's talk about loss harvesting first. What is that? Well, it's simply selling a security at a loss so that you can offset gains either this current year or in the future, or on securities that are sold at a profit. So if the market goes down and you say, man, I lost $10,000 in that investment, rather than having to wait for that investment to come back up, you could sell it at that point. You could take that $10,000 loss and you could use it to offset other current year capital gains. Or if you don't have any other capital gains, it can even offset $3,000 of ordinary income. And if you still have losses, you can actually carry it forward into the next year.
Yeah, this is just like the name implies. It is a true harvesting because look, when you have these things going on, it's nice to be able to lock in paper losses, but still keep the money working. But I got to tell you got to be careful because, and Bo, I'd love for you to walk them through how does this actually work? Because there's going to be a key word that I want everybody to pay attention to. You have to avoid the wash sell rules, and Bo can walk you through this in as you go through the process.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You may be saying, well, guys, why on earth would I ever sell an investment that lost? Isn't that timing the market? Isn't that selling at the world's worst time? Wouldn't that make me a bad investor? Well, what we're actually saying is loss harvesting is a strategy that you can implement from a tax perspective while still keeping your investment portfolio intact. Because what you want to do is when you sell a security, you can then reinvest those dollars in a different security, in a different investment, a different opportunity. So if we're coming through something like a bear market and all of the general asset classes and all of the general indices are down, it might not be uncommon for you to sell one type of holding and then go buy a different type of holding that's also down. So that way when the market recovers, you can make that. You want to make sure though that when you're selling and buying, you are buying materially different types of investments, because if you were to just sell Apple stock and try to loss harvest that, and the next day you went and bought Apple stock again, you would not be able to do that. That would be considered a wash sale, and that loss would not be able to be used. The alternative, if you were to wait 30 days post-sale and then buy your Apple stock back, then it would be a permissible loss. So you have to make sure you understand what you're selling and what you're buying so that you don't run afoul of the wash sale rules.
The tax language is actually substantially similar. So you just want to make sure you're aware of that, because we do want to keep your money working, but we also want to be very legal in how we're making this transition to keep the assets working but to lock in those paper losses.
Now, another thing you can do, we talk about loss harvesting and taking advantage of losses. Well, one of the other things you can do is actually gain acceleration. It might make sense for you to sell a security at a gain in order to accelerate that income, to force it into a taxable event. And there are a number of reasons why you might want to do this. Maybe you're in a lower income year. Maybe you have losses that you can use. Or maybe this year you might be in the 0% capital gains rate. And so you want to recognize some of those gains so that you can take advantage of that. So just like sometimes it makes sense to have losses accelerated, sometimes it also makes sense to have gains accelerated.
Yeah, this is one where I've seen this play out several different ways. And in fact, you talked about the 0% capital gains, married couples, that's a little right around the 80,000 mark. I've also seen this where somebody gets like an opportunity of a lifetime, like something really good, a piece of real estate or something comes their way, and they're like, hey, I need you guys to come up with this amount of money so I can make this deal happen. And we're like, man, every one of those holdings is that it got a pretty good gain. Well, that's when we'll say, well, hey, but we harvested all those losses in the last downturn. It's okay if we go ahead and bring some of that forward so that we can create the liquidity for you. It's okay.
So then the question becomes, all right, well, can I do this? What's required if I want to take advantage of one of these strategies? Well, step number one, you have to have a taxable brokerage account. Neither of these strategies make any kind of sense inside of a rollover IRA or a Roth IRA or a 401k. It needs to be a currently taxable account, so a brokerage account or a trust account or something like that. The other thing you have to answer is, are there securities that I want to sell? Do I actually have securities that are held at a loss if I'm looking at tax loss harvesting? Or do I have securities that are held at a gain that I'm trying to exit, that I'm trying to get out of? If you have a portfolio that's intact, that looks the way you want it to, you may not need to take any action, but if there's an opportunity in your portfolio, you ought to at least assess this annually to see, can I take advantage of these strategies?
So let's talk about, should you do this? I always think it's really all about the tax planning, and I don't know if a lot of people put enough effort into understanding how do you strategically, legally, because remember, tax evasion is illegal, but tax avoidance and planning is actually highly encouraged.
Yep.
I mean, we have a huge tax code that shows you that. And that's why I think that you need to really look at what is the need. And if you need a tax break now, or if you just want to be strategic while you're in this unfortunate situation of a bad market, why not lock in some of these losses? Or maybe you had a business venture that went wrong and you have this huge capital loss that's being carried forward. There's nothing wrong with accelerating gains to take advantage of that. You just have to kind of know where you are and then also be very, actually plan. I mean, I think that's the thing. Don't let life just happen to you. Actually be an active participant in maximizing what your money can become.
Another thing that you can do is you can see if I want to balance out low income and high income years. I'll tell you a really quick story. I have some dear clients of mine that in 2008, they bought some tech indices, right? And these tech indices were super, super low then. Well, over the last 15 years, they've done really, really, really well. And all the while, this was a high income family. And they had such large embedded gains inside these holdings, there was nothing we could really do with it because we didn't want to trigger the taxation. So we built a portfolio around these large embedded gains. Well, fast forward, now that they are beginning to retire and their income is dropping, we say, okay, this is a great opportunity for us to accelerate gains up to the 0% capital gains bracket this year so we can begin dialing down the risk in their portfolio. Rather than us having sold those securities previously, having triggered 23.8% long-term capital gains, we're going to pay 0% capital gains because their income situation has changed. So you need to understand, is that a situation I'm in? Is there a unique thing about my income this year that might make one of these strategies make sense for me?
The key thing that you just shared is another key reason on why you should consider doing this. And we put it on the slide is that if you're expecting to have a substantial drop in your tax rate, like retirement or moving to different states, these strategies can definitely be helpful, but you've got to understand the time and you also have to create the plan to execute and make this work.
All right, now, Brian, we did do one honorable mention, and I want to mention this because this is kind of a unique thing that I think not a lot of people recognize. But if you are a mutual fund investor, one of the things that happens is during the year while mutual funds are buying and selling, there are capital transactions taking place, but you don't pay taxes on those capital transactions at the time it happens. The fund companies will actually distribute those capital gains out to you at the end of the year. Well, one of the things that you can do, if you so choose, is you can look at a capital gain avoidance strategy. This is actually something, Brian, I learned from you many years ago, and something we execute for our clients every single year.
By the way, if you want to get on the naughty list with your favorite mutual fund provider, this is one they're not going to love. It is completely legal, but they don't like you to avoid this because it creates more work for them. But this is important. I mean, it was just a few years ago, I think it was both Fidelity and Vanguard had huge distributions on some of their funds.
I mean, it's like 18-20%.
Yeah, we're talking. Yeah, when your net asset value and then you have a distribution that's close to 20% of the entire value of the holding, you can imagine how this is a tax bomb. Mm-hmm. So, and then they're legally required to date. I mean, tell you the date that they're going to use, the recorded date, and then the date they're going to distribute this. If you have that knowledge, it's kind of crazy, especially if you had this holding and maybe you bought into it without knowing that it had all these embedded gains on it. It kind of is definitely in your favor to not take a 20% income hit when maybe you're flat to even down, or maybe only up 1% or 2%. You should be strategic with how you handle this.
What about the folks out there, Brian, saying, wait, you're telling me that there's going to be a 20% distribution? That sounds like a 20% rate of return. Why on earth would I sell this thing? Why would I not continue to hold this fund if they're going to have such a huge distribution?
No, they adjust for that. And that's what I think a lot of people think when I see these big income distributions, this is going to be great because that's that passive income that I saw that social media person talk about. The problem is they actually adjust the net asset value price, meaning the day they distribute it, they actually adjust the price of the holding. So net, you end up at the same place, but now you have a big tax bill to pay.
So here's what you do. At the end of every year, you go to your fund company's website. You just look, okay, what are these funds estimating their capital gain distributions are going to be? What is the record date that's going to be recorded if I hold this where I get the distribution? If my gain in the holding is less than the distribution, maybe it makes sense for me to sell, or maybe not, but I at least know what's coming so that I don't get a big tax surprise. This is something you can do every year at the end of the year. It's not incredibly complicated, but it can be incredibly valuable over the long term.
So let's talk about when you should do it. This is typically a third, fourth quarter, primarily fourth quarter action, because that's when all the big income gets distributed out. If it's at the end of the year, just kind of give this a look. But the key date is not the date they pay. It's actually the record date, the date that they actually look at who is the holders, because you don't want to just look at the payment date and think if you get out and then you actually there a record date, you might actually get a distribution of a fund that you even no longer hold, which is kind of a weird thing.
And then if your gains from the fund are smaller than the distributions you pay, it might make sense to sell. It doesn't always, but you at least want to know it so you know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, I always say don't let the tax tail wag the dog, and the fact of, because this is something we work with our advisors when they first, because you see a cool tool like this and you're like, well, we ought to do this on everything. If you're up 1 or 2%, we ought to, or you're down 1 or, but pay attention, because if the distribution's like 3%, but it's a really good fund, where you really, this is a great index fund that there's not a lot of, dissimilar funds that you're going to be able to take and roll right into, then you might want to just, hey, it's okay to take a 1 or 2% distribution and just grin and bear it. You have to kind of know where the materiality is or where the hassle factor is, but that goes into the secret sauce of being a good, experienced advisor. This all comes to, I think about what's it like to become a client. And I was hanging out with an old neighbor from Georgia, and this guy's a builder, and he was telling me he used to do tons of homes, but he's getting a little bit older, and he's like, I'm doing 5 or 6 homes a year now, and he told me what he gets paid, multiple 6 figures for each home he takes on from clients. So I'm like, that probably doesn't take, because I was like, how hard is that? And he's like, well, it's not the hardest thing, but he goes, the biggest thing I can do for clients is that I know where the trouble is, and I know where I can tell if somebody's not building the house right or a sub is doing something wrong. So I said, well, let me ask you this. Would you say that it took your 30 years of, it takes you only a few hours a day to go stop by and make sure that project's going well, but it took 30 years of you doing this and actually developing an expertise? And he goes, exactly. And that's why I get this premium. And I was like, I think you and I have a lot in common with the way we do this stuff, is that a lot of people think that there's not value in hiring advisors and stuff because they can just do it. And I don't disagree on the basic stuff. Hence why in 2006, we started creating content for you to be a better version of yourself and be a do-it-yourselfer who actually learns the secrets and has the access to know what the wealthy people are doing with their money. But I got to tell you, if I do this well enough and I teach you this, you will start reaching a level of complexity that you never realized was coming your way. And that's with, just like you would want to hire a good builder to build the house of your future, the house that you plan on retiring, why not hire a good financial advisor that can have all that experience, all that knowledge to make sure that you navigate this well as complexity hunts you down and finds you. And that's what we've been doing for the last 18 years. And I got to tell you, you guys, you're phenomenal. We have built this beautiful billion-dollar firm off of all my financial mutants who have recognized, yeah, we're filling the cup, giving you as much free advice as we can. But eventually that abundance cycle works. Come take it all. Go to moneyguy.com/resources. Get all the free stuff we offer, all the tools. But when you get complicated, I would encourage you to go to Money Guy or Abound Wealth and go to those websites and look at the Become a Client or Work with Us tabs. And I think you'll see that we can help make your journey easier.